Dearest gentle readers, welcome back to Fix and Rex, a fan fiction podcast. I'm WMN. In this episode, we will listen to another one of the fics that you recommended for all-time favorite Pollen one-shot, and have a chat with the author after. Thank you for tuning in. Playful, flirty, chaotic pollen goodness. Today we bring you The Trouble with Tea Time, written by Ninja Manda. This story is rated for general audiences. For more information, please reference the tags in the episode description of this podcast. Penelope Featherington was not permitted to step foot in the Bridgertons' home. That's what her mama had told her anyway. She was not to speak to, associate with, or generally consort with the likes of the Bridgertons in any manner of speaking. "We do not want the stain of their ruin to cloud your reputation, my dears," she would tell Penelope and Prudence smugly. Penelope had to bite her tongue to stop herself from reminding her mother that not so very long ago they were on the receiving end of a ruined family moment that they had only escaped due to the grace bestowed on them by a Bridgerton. Instead of listening to her mamma's orders, or even instead of refusing to comply, Penelope did what she had become very proficient at. She snuck out. Eloise had been surprised and delighted to receive her, and invited her to their sitting room for some tea and a friendly chat. It was quiet in the Bridgerton home that day, at least quiet for their standard. Antony was meeting with the Sharmas, his mother in tow, and Benedict was attending art class. The others were about, though Penelope had only seen Eloise so far. She had, perhaps, kept a particular eye out for Colin, but so far had no luck in locating the third Bridgerton son. "I actually have something special in store for us today," Eloise said to Penelope, her eyes glittering mischievously. "I will go get it," she announced, fleeing the room and returning only seconds later. "What is it?" Penelope asked, her eyes wide. Eloise was holding a small pouch in hand. "It is the special Grecian tea that Colin procured on his travels," Eloise explained. "It is said that it broadens your mind and expands your senses. I thought it could be fun to try." "I thought Benedict drank it all," Penelope exclaimed. "Did he not have a poor reaction to it?" "Colin brought home a few pouches, and as for my simpleton older brother, he simply took too large of a dose. If we only have but a spoonful or two each, we should receive the desired effect." Penelope was skeptical. "I'm not sure if this is the best idea," she said hesitantly. "Come on, Pen. I have been saving this stash I pilfered just for you." "Does Colin know you have it?" Penelope asked. "No. Huh, and he never will," Eloise scoffed. "I told you there will be not much of a difference for it to be noticed by my family. We will simply simply be more clever, witty, insightful." Penelope considered this. If this was as all-changing as Eloise claimed it to be, perhaps it was just the thing to make her more appealing to Colin. Or, at the very least, it would be a common discussion point in the future. "I will do it," she said. don't feel anything. Do you feel anything? Eloise asked Penelope, 2 cups of tea and 30 minutes later. Not a single thing, said Penelope. Perhaps it is a bad batch, or maybe it does not work as he says it does. Perhaps it doesn't work on us because as women we are already insightful and intelligent. Our brains must simply be as open and expansive as they could ever be, Eloise mused aloud. What did you do? Came a voice from behind them. It was, naturally, Colin Bridgerton himself, and Penelope's heart skipped a beat. Colin! She exclaimed, her voice much too shrill. She coughed. Hello, she tried again calmly. How have you been? Pen, Colin replied, smiling in spite of himself at the sight of her. It's been too long. He glanced around the table. Now, please, spare me the lack of sense I'd expect from my sister and tell me what you have done here. Well, Penelope hesitated. Eloise had stood up and was standing at the window, looking down at the passers-by. We may have, perhaps. We drank your tea, Eloise cut in with a delighted smile. The one from Greece? You did what? It doesn't seem to have much of an effect on us, however, Eloise said with a shrug. How much did you have? How much did she have? Colin turned to Penelope. I'd say we both had about a spoonful each, she estimated. Colin nodded. Per cup of tea, so about 2 or 3 spoonfuls each? Colin swore under his breath. Sorry, he said quickly to Penelope, who hid a smile. Are you quite certain you do not feel any ill effects? He asked, concern clouding his features. I feel completely fine, she smiled reassuringly at him. If you say so, he said skeptically, and then startled. Eloise! She had left the room. Where are you going? His voice carried as he followed her into the hallway. I believe I will go visit Theo, she called. Theo? Who is Theo? He yelled. As he wandered off after Eloise, Penelope stood up, deciding she was quite curious to see the remainder of the rooms in the Bridgerton home that she hadn't had the opportunity to view yet. She wandered through the second-floor hallway over to a room and opened the door, peering inside. It was a study. How very interesting. She ran her hands along the items on the desk, and then the books along the shelves. She paused to giggle as she considered how much of a disaster it would be if she were to move some of those alphabetized books around. She did not consider it for long and rushed to switch the tomes around chaotically, even turning some upside down. The act gave her a rush of adrenaline that she found she quite enjoyed. So she glanced about the room to find something else she could do to replicate the feeling. She found a quill laid out on the desk and fingered it, lifting it and dipping it in ink, swirling thick lines around the parchment that was laid out. She even dared to write the letters C and P together with a satisfied smile before she set the quill down and moved on to the next curiosity. She rifled through a pile of parchments neatly in place and pushed them off the desk with a cackle, and then paused, finding herself growing bored of the room. She moved to leave, when suddenly she heard a sound coming from outside the room, and decided the best course of action was to hide herself behind the window curtains. Pen? Penelope? Colin's voice called out as he entered the room. Oh, good God, he moaned as he noticed the mess. Suddenly, she heard him swear. He ran to open the window and peered outside to look for her, as if he were nervous that she had attempted to scale the wall. Penelope muffled a laugh and pulled back the curtain. "Boo!" she exclaimed, and he yelped. She could not stop her fits of giggles then, doubled over with laughter that was decidedly indecent, but could not be stopped. "Oh no, not you two," he mumbled, appearing quite unamused. "Whatever do you mean?" Penelope asked him. "I feel fine. Where's Eloise?" "Gregory and Hyacinth are watching her, and I am tasked to fetch you and bring you to her in the drawing room so that you may be watched together." "Ah, I see," Penelope said, walking slowly towards the door, her arms behind her back. "I suppose we better go then." She began to slowly meander a few steps in the correct direction, and then suddenly halted, turning on her heel. "Actually, no, I have a better idea." She began to march quickly towards another room, a different room that she had always wanted to view. "Pen, where are you going?" Colin asked, following closely. She came upon the door in question and opened it, smiling broadly. "My room?" Colin asked, his face perplexed. "How did you know which one is mine?" "I have my ways, Mr. Bridgerton," Penelope responded smugly, and Colin's eyebrows shot up. She began to wander aimlessly through his bedchamber, examining his things. "A book on plants?" she asked him, skimming her fingers along the cover. "A friend of mine studies them," Colin explained. "I thought it would be interesting." "What is this, then?" she asked, lifting up a leather-bound book. "Don't touch that, please," he said quickly, reaching for the book, but Penelope hid it behind her back. "What is it?" she asked curiously. "It's my journal, if you must know." He sighed. "I always kept a journal during my travels, and since I returned, I have continued the hobby." "You write?" Penelope asked, unable to hide her keen interest. "I did not take you for a writer." "I suppose you do write compelling letters." "Yes, well, I suppose you do not know everything about me," he said with a coy smile, holding out his hand for his journal. "No, but I think I know more than anyone else," Penelope dared to say in return, still hiding the book. He raised a single eyebrow, his coy smile transforming into a smirk. "Oh, you think so?" he asked, leaning back against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. "Then what am I thinking now?" "You are thinking that you need to bring me over to the drawing room immediately so that you may watch both Eloise and I." He nodded. "You are also concerned that we are quite alone in a room together." She drew out the words, touching his cravat as she spoke to him. His smile faltered, and his gaze grew serious. She observed him swallow, visibly. She was still touching his cravat. "How I would like to rip this off of you, Colin Bridgerton," she whispered. "Pen," he began, but suddenly a loud crash resounded from another room. "Eloise," Colin sighed. "I'll be right back," he said to Penelope, running to the door. He paused in the doorway, looking back at her. "Stay put, Penelope Featherington. Do not move a muscle," he warned her sternly. She giggled. "Or else what?" He shot her a look, shaking his head. "I mean it." "Fine, fine." She waved him away and he left at a run. Penelope set his journal down and wandered over to his drawers, opening them one by one. First, she found Colin's various ties, his handkerchiefs, and then there they were, his cravats, his God-forsaken cravats. Penelope took one in hand. It was a light blue color, the same as one would see in any nursery. She did not favor it. Grasping it in her hand, she compressed it into a ball and smiled with satisfaction. And then an idea came to her. She wandered over to his open window, looking across the way. There was her home. There was her window. Penelope paused then, as she realized Colin had a perfect view from his room into hers. Interesting. She then took the cravat that was balled up in her hand, held it over the edge, and she dropped it onto the front steps below. She laughed then at her own clever idea and returned to his drawer, gathering up all the cravats she could get her hands on. The black one, the purple one, the red one, the silken ones, the patterned ones. She took them all into her hands and threw them out the window. She could hear Eloise's voice from below singing, "It's raining cravats!" Penelope Featherington! Colin rushed over to her, agape at what he saw. "What on earth are you doing?" he asked. "Helping you," she said happily. "You have a lovely neck. You really should allow it to breathe." His face turned pink in embarrassment. "You have many lovely qualities about you," she said dreamily. "Oh, yes?" he asked curiously, trying to suppress a smile. "And what are those exactly?" "You have a beautiful smile. And your hair is so very nice and thick," she told him without hesitation. "You have such interesting stories, especially of your travels. You often make me laugh with some of them. You are loyal and chivalrous. You are kind and show so much care to your family and to me." His eyes warmed. "And when we dance, I find myself quite swept away by how very much I enjoy being held in your arms. You make me feel safe," she said, reaching out to take his hand. Colin allowed it and even stroked his thumb along the back of her palm. He did not let go. His gaze grew curious, full of anticipation as it moved closer to hers. "Colin!" called Gregory's voice from far away. "She is trying to leave out the window again. Can you come help, please?" Colin heaved a heavy sigh, full of resignation. "Come with me," he said to Penelope, taking her hand in his to lead her from the room. She went with him only because it meant she was able to hold his hand. Penelope was led into the drawing room by Colin, who deposited her on the sofa next to Eloise, who appeared quite petulant and grouchy, her arms crossed over her chest. "I really do not understand why I need to be minded like some small infant," she groused. "You broke Mother's vase," Gregory exclaimed, at the same time from Hyacinth. "You tried to climb out the window." "Everyone is clearly overreacting, said Eloise with a roll of her eyes. I'm fine. We're fine. Pen, tell them we're fine. We're fine, Penelope said happily. She turned to Eloise and whispered rather loudly, I threw all of Colin's cravats out the window. Hyacinth cackled. Eloise's eyes widened and she raced over to the window to see. I thought I saw cravats flying from the sky. Oh, fantastic work. She turned to Colin. That truly needed to happen. They're right, you know, Hyacinth said, and Gregory nudged her as Colin examined his family rather peevishly. I have nothing to say, Gregory said loyally. I'll have to pick those up later, mumbled Colin. Please don't, retorted Hyacinth. In the midst of the conversation, Eloise was edging towards the door until she was spotted by her meddling older brother. I don't think so, said Colin firmly, leading her back to the sofa. Now, perhaps we should ring for some tea service, not because they need any more tea. He shot both girls an alarmed look, but perhaps to get some food in them. A biscuit does sound rather appealing, Eloise agreed. I will go request some, said Gregory, as he quickly left the room. Did you really try to climb out the window? Penelope whispered to Eloise. They would not let me leave, Eloise bellowed, and Penelope giggled in response. Eloise, you tried to make a rope out of Mother's silk curtains, Hyacinth pointed out. Yes, I did, she agreed. And it would have worked too if it was not for yet another grumpy older brother spoiling everything. Colin simply glared at her. I'm bored, Eloise declared suddenly. Here we go again, Colin sighed. Hyacinth, will you please write a letter for me as I dictate the words? I would dearly love to write it, but the room is quite spinny. Hyacinth smothered a laugh and went to fetch a piece of parchment and quill. She returned and sat down at the table near them, poised to write. To whom will this be made out to? To Antony, announced Eloise somberly. Hyacinth raised an eyebrow with a smirk and began to record her words. I am very sorry to have witnessed your cancelled nuptials, she said. Colin opened his mouth to interrupt, but Eloise continued on, raising her voice louder. It caused quite the stir. Perhaps I can give you some advice so that you do not frighten the next young lady you decide to court. Hyacinth smothered a laugh, but continued to record her words diligently. Your face can be quite grouchy sometimes. You may want to work on that. Did you realize that about yourself? Why is your face so angry, actually? All right, that is enough, Colin sighed, seizing the writing samples from Hyacinth, who was still struggling to keep a straight face. His stern expression faltered slightly as he met Penelope's gaze, his mouth twitching in an almost laugh. In walked Gregory, who was followed by a footman carrying a large tray of tea, sandwiches, and treats. Eloise's arm shot out and immediately grabbed a biscuit off the tray, stuffing it into her mouth. Very nice, Colin said sarcastically. He turned instead to Penelope. Would you like some, Pen? He held out a plate of sandwiches to her, and she took a cucumber one, nibbling on it delicately. Delicious, Eloise said, her mouth full. Gregory and Hyacinth snickered. Colin pinched the bridge of his nose as if in agony. Why did Mother choose to leave me home alone with you lot of wild beasts? Was it punishment? He turned to Penelope. Not you, Pen. Her face flushed happily. Though you did toss my favorite cravats, he added, and she scowled at him. Think of it as a favor. Your neck really did need to breathe. His neck needed to breathe, she said to Hyacinth, who nodded in agreement. Favor, mumbled Eloise. She was slumped over, dozing on the sofa, a half-eaten biscuit clutched in her hand. Uh-oh, said Colin. This can often occur when the effects of the tea begin to wear. Let us get her to bed. He helped his sister to stand and slung her arm around his neck. Will you be all right? He asked Penelope. She nodded. I feel perfectly fine. He eyed her warily, but continued on with Eloise. Will you please watch her? Colin asked Gregory, and then he turned to Hyacinth. Could you help me with our dear sister? But of course, said Hyacinth smugly. I will never allow her to forget this for the rest of her life, she sang as they left the room. Gregory peered over at Penelope. How are you feeling? He asked her, helping himself to a sandwich. I feel fine, Penelope said, settling back onto the sofa. It was quite comfortable and nice and warm here. Her eyelids were beginning to grow heavy. Oh, no. No, I'm all right. Just resting my eyes. Colin! Penelope could hear Gregory yell, and then the world went black. The next thing Penelope knew, she felt the strong arms of Colin Bridgerton enveloping her body as she was being lifted into the air. Colin? She mumbled. Shh. It's fine, Pen. I'm going to take you to a guest's bedroom so that you can sleep this off. I should not wish for your mother to see you like this. She would never allow you to return here again. She nodded against his shoulder. Gregory is having a maid make up a room for you. May I carry you there? It doesn't appear that you can walk, he said. Mm-hmm, she agreed. He carried her along as she gazed around at her surroundings dazedly. She looked up at him, admiring his neck, his beautiful throat. The cravat that he had been wearing was gone. Your neck is free, she whispered. He chuckled. I decided to take your fashion advice, since I have such a, supposedly, lovely neck, he said. You do, Penelope insisted. I'm glad you think so, he whispered in her ear, and she shivered. The room's ready, Colin, said Gregory. Colin carried Penelope into a bedchamber and set her on the bed. Luckily, she was now awake enough to climb under the covers. Will she be all right? Asked Gregory, his eyebrows knitting together in concern. She'll be fine. She just needs rest, Colin said. Gregory! Hollered Hyacinth from the next room. Come here and help me unknot the silk curtains before Mama sees them. Why should I have to help? He called back. You're the one who told her to knot them in the first place. Well, silk is slippery. She would have just slid right down it and been killed, Gregory mumbled to himself as he exited the room, leaving Colin and Penelope quite alone. Colin glanced at the door and then back at Penelope, as if he were deciding something, and then sat on the edge of her bed with a sigh, tucking the blankets around her. So sleepy, she yawned. You had quite the adventure, he agreed. Colin? Yes, Pen? Are we friends? She asked him quietly. Of course we are, he said, looking at her with concern. "Did I say something to cause you to think otherwise?" "I do not want you to get married one day and cease being my friend. I do not want you to leave me," she explained sleepily. He reached out and captured her hand in his. "That will never happen," he said. "Promise?" she asked, holding out her pinky finger. He smiled fondly at her and held out his to cross with hers. "Promise," he replied. She lurched forward then, throwing her arms around his neck. "Thank you for taking care of me," she said. He tentatively wove his arms around her and relaxed into her embrace. "Of course," Colin said, his mouth muffled by her shoulder. She lay back then, detangling herself from his arms, and he breathed a deep, shuddering sigh. "I should let you get some rest," he said quietly, his face contemplative. He hesitated, then leaned forward, laying a soft kiss on her forehead. As he pulled back, Penelope whispered, her eyes fluttering closed. "Can I keep you?" His hand reached forward to smooth a lock of her hair, as if in response, and she opened her eyes to find him gazing fondly at her. "May I touch your hair?" she asked. His face flushed pink for the third time that day as he chuckled. He inclined his head over her, and she reached up to run her fingers through it, smiling in delight. "I've always wanted to know how it felt," she said shyly. "It's soft." He swallowed then, the smile sliding from his face, replaced with something different, something more tender. She reached up a hand to touch his lips. "I've always wanted to know what they've felt like." The air felt thick between them. It could not be said if she moved towards him or if he moved towards her, or perhaps more likely, it was both. It was as if they were drawn to each other by some unseen force. And then it happened. Their lips touched. Soft pressure of his mouth against hers made Penelope's heart sigh with happiness. Her very first kiss. She could not help but sigh out loud as well. Against his lips. Colin pulled back, his eyes dancing happily, and he took Penelope's hand in his again, stroking his thumb lightly along her skin. "Sleep well, Pen. We'll need to speak when you wake up." She mumbled incoherently now, sleep finally seeking to overtake her, as he rose and made his way to the other door. Colin paused in the doorway, turning back to look at Penelope. He watched her for a moment. "You can keep me," he whispered, "as long as I may keep you." Now that we've shared highs, laughs, and heartwarming moments, let's shift gears and step into the creative mind behind the story. Joining us for a chat is the brilliant author of The Trouble with Tea Time. Welcome, Ninjamanda.
Hello! Thanks for having me.
So baby WMN that started reading Always April of 2022 is legitimately freaking out right now that I'm having a conversation with Ninjamanda. So I'm just going to casually ask you my first question. Which fandom initially sparked your interest in fanfiction?
You know what? I was always a creative kid who loved reading and writing. So my first experience in fandom, not to age myself too much, was probably when computers were, really getting into popularity and there was kind of a fan space for people, mostly on message boards. There was not a thing like Twitter. There was not a thing like Instagram. I don't think it was even predating maybe even fanfiction.net, but I'm not sure. But believe it or not, my first experience in writing for fandom was for soap operas when I was about like 12 or 13.
I love that.
I had a couple in particular I really enjoyed. One was the soap opera Passions, which is no longer in existence, sadly. And then the other was Young and the Restless. To this day, I do not watch soap operas anymore.
What was your soap opera watching experience like after school?
I think I would record it, and this is how old I am. This predates when they had we had PVRs. So I would literally record with a VCR tapes. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
I would record my shows. I would even buy the little like soap opera digest magazines you can get in the supermarket. As I was a little nerd, I would sit there and I would read them while my mom would go shopping for our groceries. So I would just sit there and read those. And
13-year-old you.
Yeah, little 13-year-old me.
Wait, so 13 is middle school?
Yeah, so I'm from Canada, actually. So for me, that would be junior high, I believe, probably around grade 8 or so.
I love it. 13-year-old Ninja Manda with her soap opera digest.
Yes, exactly. And I would write fan fiction, and I think it started on some message boards, then it moved to fanfiction.net. I even had, if anyone remembers this, a GeoCities website.
Whoa.
Where I made like a little fan page with my limited HTML knowledge as a child, dedicated. It was hot pink, and it was like bright yellow, hot pink, had like sparkly like hearts on it. It was the most bizarre thing in the world, but that's when I fell in love with fandom, the fandom culture. And of course, since then, I've dabbled.
Wait, so what, do you remember any of the fics that you wrote? Like, what were you writing?
Okay, so I have never been the kind of person who enjoys maybe the pairs that everyone else enjoys always. So for Passions in particular, there was this one couple, Kay and Miguel. They were not actually a couple. Miguel was supposed to be with this girl, Charity, who's Kay's cousin. But she was so goody-goody and like kind of boring to me that I really liked Kay, who was kind of the bad girl who was always trying to steal Miguel, quote unquote, from Charity. So I shipped them, and I would write fan fiction. None of it was smutty because I was a child, essentially, but it was just, funny little stories.
So you like the morally gray character.
Yeah, exactly.
The more complex scenario.
You're like, I'm seeing where this is leading. Yes, I've always been drawn to the more morally gray characters, the more complicated people. For sure.
I'm freaking out right now because this explains so much.
It does.
When I think about you, I think about high levels of dramatic tension. I think about romance. Your romance is literally off the charts. Your love declarations always make me swoon, which, hello.
Oh, thank you.
What is more soap opera than drama?
You're right.
Yeah, you keep the drama at such a high level throughout the story, and you maintain it there.
You know what? Wow, you're right. Because I specifically, when I talk about the friends that I write stories, like I have one particular friend, Jessica, who I always message my ideas, and then I'll taunt her. I'll say, and I'm going to leave this story on a cliffhanger. Mwahaha, like, and she's like, you're evil.
I knew it. I knew that's what you were doing to us.
I do that all the time.
I knew you love it.
I do. I love it. I get a sick pleasure from it. It's true.
Also, can I just say, illicit instruction Cressida is 1,000,000,000% villain straight out of a daytime drama.
Yeah, like, she is. She's 100%. Very like soap. Oh, you know what? You're explaining so much to me about myself that I'm not even realizing. I had never realized this until now. Another thing that I want to point out about that couple that I liked, and actually both soap opera couples that I liked when I was younger, is both of them were like friends to lovers.
Yeah.
Both of them started out as kind of unrequited. The girl had a crush on the guy, and you didn't really know his feelings because he, had a girlfriend or whatever. And it was like a friends to lovers thing.
So you're friends to lovers all the way back to Baby Ninja Manda.
Yes, always. Baby Ninja Manda was friends to lover realness.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes. If I had to pick any trope, I would pick that one.
It's so good. It's so good because there's so many possibilities for the story to be told.
Right.
So many ways in, so many opportunities for vulnerability, for drama.
It's just, and it's so
Yeah,
sweet.
And it hits so hard.
It just, the journey that it takes, it's just so much better than just, to me personally, than Insta Love or something like that. Like just the pining, the slow progression, the romantic tension, just Friends to Lovers is just mwah, chef's kiss to me.
Sidebar, that's making me think. I'm really very much looking forward to seeing how Shonda handles Ben's story.
Right, exactly.
The love at first sight.
It's very interesting. That's never been my favorite trope. I'm sure they'll do a good job with it. But it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that because I agree with you. I love me a build.
Yeah. So it's funny with that story because it starts out as Insta Love, but then it becomes kind of like enemies to lovers mixed with a friends to lovers.
You're right.
We'll see. We'll see how the show ends up handling that. Should be interesting.
Okay, so 13-year-old Ninja Manda, loving soap operas, and then what came next after that?
Lizzie McGuire. So that was a big one for me for a little while. I was definitely a Lizzie Gordo shipper, Friends to Lovers again. So that was a big one.
Lizzie and Gordo, the slowest burn of slow burns.
Yes, I loved them. And I was such a little, it was my perfect age group for me. Like it was the perfect, at that point in my life, I was around the same age as Lizzie, maybe a little older, but about the same age, so.
Oh, so that's awesome because then you started in soap operas, which was not your age group when you were 13. And then you found Lizzie McGuire.
Yeah.
So this one felt like a really good space for you to explore.
Yeah, and I got to be dramatic, but in a very youthful way.
Yeah.
So I think I wrote one or two long fics and like a short story. I'm not remembering all the details. Somehow I'm remembering I used one of Hilary Duff's songs about rain or something. And I remember there was like a very emo part of my writing where she was in the rain, and it was very dramatic because, you know, I live for the drama. I always have. So
what brought you to the Pollen fandom?
So I had watched Bridgerton season 1, like probably a lot of people did, when it was first released, Christmas of 2020, was it? It was like right after the pandemic. I don't even remember anymore. It was quite a while ago. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
2020 was pandemic. We were all
the
locked
funny
in.
thing is, my birthday is actually on December 26th. So I'm a Boxing Day girl. And it actually came out on Christmas Day. So I spent my birthday evening.
Yeah.
I convinced my mom, I'm like, we're watching this. Like, it's my birthday. I'm doing what I want to do. This show looks amazing. I've always loved Regency type productions. Like, I love Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, Emma, Sensibility, all of those things. I love those. So I knew this, as soon as I saw the trailers for the show, this show would be right up my alley. So I watched it and I was entranced. I think I binged the first season in like a couple days. But I remember even from the first episode, I was like, who are these two? About Colin and Penelope. Like, I was like, they're so cute.
All your friends to lovers alarms were starting to go off. They're like, ding, 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 ding.
I was like, ding, ding, ding. Like, this is perfect. And I just like that, the dynamic with her being like the best friends, I guess he was the best friend's older brother.
With Eloise.
And and they just had like such a cute dynamic when he rescued her from Cressida. So I remember that.
Oh, I know. We started Vauxhall, which I could watch a million times.
That's one of my favorite scenes, 100%. But I remember Googling after, I think it was a few episodes. I think I let it go for a few episodes to see what happened. But I am not a person who shies away from spoilers in any way, shape, or form. So I Googled, I'm like, Colin, Penelope, Bridgerton. I'm like, I wonder if they do get together because, and I found out, this is a book. And well, they do get together. This is great news for me. So that made me even more invested in the show, just knowing that my ship would be, would sail. So then I think
Did you read the book?
Yeah. So after season 1, I read the first few books.
You started with Duke and I?
Yeah, I think I started with Duke and I, and then I read the second book, and then I eventually got to Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. I think I read the first 4 books just then.
Oh, you have some restraint.
Yeah, right? I know.
You waited. You read in order.
I did. Well, once I Googled what happened, I was like, okay, I can wait and see how it gets to that point. Because it is cute to read throughout the first few books, their interactions and things. So
yeah, the little glimmers. You're right.
The little glimmers, yeah.
I particularly like Penelope and the Viscount.
Yeah. I wish there was more of that, in season 2, but that's okay.
Yeah. I know. Oh, my heart. I was like, where's the Penelope Anthony scene?
I know.
Yes, my heart.
He was so sweet with her.
And that's where Kate was first like, oh, maybe he's not a total jerk.
Yeah, because he's nice to this girl, Penelope.
But they went a different direction.
No, it's just fine.
I do mourn the loss of that scene.
Yeah, artistic license, etc., etc. Whatever, Netflix. But
I know.
Yeah, but I read those books, and then I think after I got to Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, I was pretty satisfied for the moment. So I was like, okay, I'm done for now.
Yeah.
I didn't really look into anything fandom at that point in time. I was just kind of like, okay, I'm happy. I read the books, go on with my life, do whatever it is I was doing at the time. And then when season 2 came out, which I think was about a year and a half later, I believe. I watched season 2. I binged the whole season 2 because I was so excited for it. I binged it within like a day or 2.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? I feel inspired. At that point in time, I actually hadn't written fan fiction for any fandoms, I want to say, for like at least 5 years, if not closer to 10.
Wow.
I haven't written in a very long time. Yeah, I went through a stage which I just wasn't really writing. I just, I'm very much a mood writer.
Yeah.
So I have to be inspired and in the mood to write. I'm not good at forcing myself to write when I'm not in the mood. So I just got so inspired.
Was it the totality of it all? Or was it Heart Eyes, Colin Heart Eyes?
Yeah.
Do you remember what was like, I have to write?
Well,
or was it the way that they destroyed us at the end of season 2?
I think it was all of season 2 as a whole. I remember watching the scene where Colin was talking about the scene. Okay, so it was the scene where different men were like reading poetry and stuff at, I believe, at Lady Danbury's.
Yes.
But then it was the You're a Friend, You Don't Count, that scene. I remember watching that, and I was just like, along with Penelope, when Colin was saying, all these kind words, and then he's just like, and I realized it's myself, and I'm like, are you kidding me? You weren't talking about Penelope, you were talking about yourself. Okay.
Well, it was brilliant because they built us up. They built us up with Heart Eyes. They built us up at the racetrack. And we were all there. We're like, what's happening? Are we getting our season now? Like, what? How are they going to? And then he says that.
I know.
And I think there was a collective fandom sound of our hearts like imploding on themselves.
My heart shattered in that moment.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, I love that you just talked about that moment.
Yeah. It was such an interesting moment because it really was quite dramatic, and it was very inspiring to be like, oh, like seeing this poor girl's little heart shatter just like mine did watching her. I'm like, oh, this would be interesting to write about. And then you just keep watching the whole season because, as I said, I binged it. And then the end, the drama of it all, of her dancing with him and him saving her from family ruin, and, her compliments to him and him lighting up, and, just beautiful.
Because you read Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, and you know that there's that crushing moment in the prologue.
Exactly.
So I personally was not ready to be crushed that hard at the end of season 2. Like, I was not ready.
I was not expecting it.
I think it was brilliant that they decided to end season 2 with that and leave us just Shattered.
Utterly destroyed.
We're left with nothing, which is, I think, inspired so many people to start writing.
I think it did, honestly. Just because at that point in time, that was when I decided I'm gonna start. I'm gonna write for this fandom.
You had that season 2 inspiration just fueling those creative fires.
I did, just running through my veins.
I have such fond memories of Always because you started writing that just a couple weeks after season 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I was with you. I feel honestly, I said my disclaimer that I'm going to try to not freak out because I spent a lot of time with you.
Aw, did you read it when it came out?
I did read it while you were updating it.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
It was such a beautiful way to process season 2, to spend more time with these characters that I really wanted to spend time with. And you started writing before we even knew it was Penelope and Colin.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just that inspired.
It was a special time. All of us just absolutely freaking out. So excited because we got heart eyes. We got so much angst.
Yes, it was fun to write that.
Yeah, Always is very special to me. And that's your first Pollen fic. That Always is what brought you out of retirement.
It did. And I remember, and nobody contact my work about this, not that you guys can because no one knows where I work, but I remember when I got the inspiration for Always, like the actual story, I was at work and I was thinking to myself, what if I wrote about this? And I just snowballed and I was furiously just writing out the whole, like, very point blank, kind of very surface level summary of what would happen in the whole story at work. Like during one work shift at my desk.
Listen, I love it when our authors get paid to write.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care how you do it. As long as no one is getting hurt.
Exactly. You know what? We can call it a long break.
Yes, you are a hard worker. That is one thing I know for sure.
Oh, you're
so
kind.
I'm sure you are giving everything that you have.
Yes.
When you're not writing at work.
Exactly. So you know what? I don't feel too bad about that. But I was.
I love that.
I was struck by the inspiration, so I planned it all out. I started writing. I planned everything. I started posting twice a week. Mm-hmm. And I was that point of my writing was a really enjoyable time for me because I got to just really concentrate on writing. I didn't have other distractions. It was just me, my writing. I would go on my break into my car and I would plan things out. I would post fics because I would try to do it at certain times of the day that most of people would be awake, like British people would be, in the evening for them, but, North American people would be waking up and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to time this right for the release. And it got to the point where it was so fun to post, but I was like, I want more interaction.
Yeah.
So it was actually funny. I would go on Twitter and I would look at the pollen tag just to see what people were saying about pollen in general, because at that point, I think it was just season 3 was just announced at that point.
May.
And people were excited. There was a lot going on online. I was like, and I've always been kind of a shy person about getting involved in fandom spaces. Like, I have a difficult time just inserting myself and being like, hey, I'm Amanda, let's be friends. So
me too. I'm a total wallflower. I really am. I'm like, hi guys. I love you.
I know. It's like, hi guys. Like, if you want to be my friend, I'm here.
You want to be my friend? You want to talk about pollen? Yes.
Trust me. Yeah. If anyone wants to be a fandom friend of mine, feel free to reach out.
On Twitter. And I'll be sure to link your Twitter account on the Instagram page.
Yes.
That's where you're mainly active, right?
Yes. I'm mainly on Twitter. Yes.
So you're writing Always, and then we get the announcement that it's Penelope and Colin season next season, and that led you to Twitter?
Yeah, so you're right. So I had heard about the announcement. I was on Twitter. I was just kind of looking through the pollen tags. This is on my own personal, Twitter that I had that I never use, but I was just kind of looking around. I actually saw one person on Twitter who had this really interesting thread And her thread was all about what we can expect from Colin and Penelope, why it makes sense that next season's about them. It was this really interesting, in-depth, really thoughtful thread on Twitter. And I was like, this person is really cool. So I kept reading her Twitter more, and then I saw she mentioned Always, like my story. And I was like, what? And I think I cried.
Oh
I
my
was like,
gosh.
someone talked about my story who didn't feel like they needed to just, because I would get nice comments and
Yeah.
things, of course, because people, read your story and, you kind of become used to that. And I appreciate every nice comment I ever get, of course. But like, I did not expect anyone to be talking about my fic unsolicited, just on Twitter, just randomly talking about how great it was. And I was like, what? So I think I even told my family about it. I was like, someone was talking about my story. Like, that's a moment in fan fiction you feel like you've made it. I'm telling you that's that moment for me. So
That resonates super deeply for me.
yes.
And it is solicited, but when I get the recommendations, I make sure I let the authors know that, like, hey, you're not connected to this at all. I just said, what's your favorite fic? And out in the vastness of the internet, someone said your name. Someone remembered that you moved them. I just think it's so special,
Yeah.
right? Just like you said,
It's
outside of the
special.
space that you created. You
Absolutely.
created a space for Always.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense that people will find it and comment there. But I just think it's absolutely beautiful and amazing that love carries in other spaces where we want to share what makes us excited, what makes us happy within the fandom. And there's your name. There's Ninja Manda. The Trouble with Tea Time came up
Yeah.
several times when I would chat with people about their favorite fic.
Oh,
And then it
so
came up
kind.
completely independently within the comments.
Oh,
I think that's so special. I'm so glad you brought up that story.
yeah. It means like a lot. I just want to say, as an author, what people say about your writing, yes, in comments, trust me, everyone who ever wonders, should I leave a comment? Like, would they love it? Even if it's years later, do.
Yeah.
Please leave a comment. I can't tell you as an author how motivating it is when you have people saying positive things about your work, even if it's just a quick, like, this was great or something, it means a lot to writers because we do it for
even
free.
an emoji. I've heard authors be like, even an emoji is
Like a
like,
heart.
you took the time to say, I was here with you.
Yeah. The unsolicited, when you get a comment like that, like, it lights up your whole world. Like, if you were to see, I've randomly seen my fic mentioned on Tumblr or on Reddit and things like that. So whenever I have, sometimes my friends will send me things they see. They'll be like, oh, someone mentioned your writing. Anytime that happens, let me just tell you, if you're wondering how to make someone's day, that is how to do it.
Yeah.
Light up your face with a whole big smile because someone mentioned, you and your writing out of nowhere. It means a lot. So
It does.
so back to what happened with this person. So she had mentioned Always, and a couple other people had replied. So I actually replied back to her and said, hey, that's my story, like, from my personal Twitter. And I said, thank you so much for enjoying it. Like, this meant a lot to me. And I love your Twitter, by the way, and your thread. And she wrote back to me being like, oh, no problem. Like, your story's great. And then I ended up, I'm not sure how I got the nerve to do this because, as I said, I am a wallflower. I am very shy when it comes to meeting people. So I had actually decided to DM her on Twitter and just say, like, thank you so much, like, and I was like, you know what? I want a friend in this space. I want someone I can talk about my theories and my ideas and my storyline. Like, I want to have someone to talk about this with. So I ended up DMing her, and she and I started talking, and we became friends. And she is the one who had told me, listen, the Pollen community is really cool. Like, you should join it. So I made a Pollen Twitter after that, and I joined Pollen Twitter online, and I made a whole bunch of friends from it. So, and I'm still friends with that girl to this day. Her name is Jessica. Her Twitter @ is Upon a Starry Sky. People may have read some of her fics too. She's written a bit online as well. I think she's on hiatus right now. And she kind of pulled me in, made me feel included, told me, you know, these are great accounts to follow for news, and kind of brought me into the world. And then I made a lot of friends elsewhere. So shout out to Pollen Twitter. I'm at Pretty and Pollen. You know, it's a great community.
Twitter is also where you found the inspiration for The Trouble with Tea Time, right?
Well, that's just it. And yeah, actually the interesting thing to lead into that is it was from like a random prompt that some of my friends and I came up with. So some of my fandom friends and I.
That you came up with?
We did, okay. Yeah. So what we were doing is, I don't even remember what the conversation was about. We were just being silly on Twitter. But we ended up using a GIF from Casper, the movie Casper.
Here is where, dying to hear where Casper comes in, because you mentioned it very quickly, either in the tags or the notes. I don't remember, but like I was like, what? Say more, Ninja Manda. Say more about this prompt and Casper.
Do you know what? I wish I could tell you exactly how it links to Pollen. I don't even know. It was one of those things that snowballed, but it was one of those things where we had used a GIF in some kind of context. And we were like, wouldn't this be cute for a pollen thing? And then someone had replied and it snowballed and we were like, yeah, like a pollen story. And then somehow it became, let's do for the anniversary of Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, let's do a prompt where anyone who wants to participate can come up with a story that involves, it had to include the line, "Can I keep you?" Just anywhere in the story.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Because there's that scene from Casper. So for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, there's the ghost Casper, friendly ghost, played by Devon Sawa, you know, little hunk for people my age, back in, you know, in the 90s. And then you have Christina Ricci. So they had this whole little situation where I think they were like slow dancing when he was a human. There's this whole romantic scene with that. It was very cute, like very pure, very cute. And pretty much how it came is there was this line that Casper whispers to her where he's like, "Can I keep you?" And it's just so cute, so pure. So I don't know why it led to us thinking of that, but we decided that would be very cute to have in a pollen fic. So there was a bunch of us who actually wrote pieces, and some of the pieces out there that people might have read, there was a few different fics that were from that prompt. So sometimes when you're looking, if you see in the tags, "Can I keep you?" as like that on the tags.
That it was from that?
It was from that.
Oh, the way you use that line when she says, I cannot believe that that's the Casper. I love it.
That's why. Yeah.
You know what? I love it when we get prompts.
Yeah.
On the first fic that we read, which was Falling, Jayele, it was from a prompt as well, and she had to write within a certain number of words. And that caused her to really have to solidify her style, and really it affected the way that she wrote that fic, and it's like a really beautiful example of her work. And hearing you say that this was all centered around this one line is amazing, because when we get to that point and she looks up at him, it is such a Ninja Manda high octane romantic moment. My heart is squeezing. It's so beautiful, and I freaking love that it came because of the prompt.
Right?
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, it's just kind of funny because we had to fit that in. So then I had that prompt, but I'm like, what should I do with this? Like, I don't know. What kind of story can I do? And I actually had another fandom friend, Nala, shout out Nala, who gave me the idea. She doesn't like to write herself. So she's not a writer, but she loves to read fanfic and talk about it. She is an awesome person. She's Canadian as well. And she had mentioned to me, I think in a group chat setting, she was like, oh, what if there was a fic about Penelope and Eloise getting high off Colin's Grecian tea? And I was like, you're a genius. You're brilliant. Like, I love that idea. And then I'm like, wait. And then I came up with the whole storyline for how that led into the how that Can I Keep You and the cravats flying, and a lot of the things in that fic were fandom related.
Cravats flying. That's what I hear. Every person who brought up The Trouble with Tea Time being one of their favorite fics, the first thing that they say is the visual of the cravats flying. It just is everything. It's such a good visual. It stays with us. If you bring it up to somebody, the fics where Penelope throws the cravats out the window, immediately we know.
That's
or
that
Special
one.
T.
Aww.
You know, it's so cool when there's fics that are so easily identifiable. Because there's so many. There's over 2,000 now.
Yeah.
There's only going to be more. But I feel like anyone who's read this fic, no matter how far into the future we are, we can say, do you remember that fic where Penelope and Eloise got super high on Special T and Penelope threw she freed the neck?
She freed the neck.
She freed the neck.
Well, that's such a fandom thing because it was really in the community that I got the inspiration for that particular part, because my spaces on
Really?
Twitter.
Oh.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
spaces on Twitter, everyone was always talking about hashtag free the neck movement and like lose the cravats Colin
And that was that pre Pirate Colin? Was that pre our spoiler or was that post?
it was pre. It was pre.
Listen. This fandom, we are soothsayers. We are
We make things happen.
we are predictors of the future. So free the neck, your fic, and then we get Colin with the free neck. You must have just been over the moon.
Oh, I was happy when I saw that picture. I was like, yes, please just keep that this way. But who knows, right? With seeing other pictures. Back when we got the preview from Tudum with just the pictures, I was like, oh
my
no,
gosh.
he has cravats again. Come on, guys.
I know.
I'm
Oh,
hoping
yes.
as the season goes on, he'll maybe loosen up a little bit and we'll get to see his neck a little more.
My goodness, this is really cool hearing this, that you had the prompt, the line prompt, and then Nala, you said? Was it Nala?
Yeah, my friend Nala.
Nala gave you the idea to use Special T, and then free the neck. So really what I love about this fandom is the community aspect of it.
Oh, truly.
So Tea Time was a community effort.
Oh, absolutely.
You brought it all together.
I was just the vessel. I was the vessel for all the inspiration, but
You're more than a vessel.
thank you.
It's really, really cool. And that says a lot about you, in my opinion, as an
thank
author and a
you.
person, that you took all of those ideas and you 100% committed to each one of those aspects. And you gave us
Try to give the people what they want, like
this really fun fic. You gave us this escape. You gave us it's community too. Each fic is community as well. So you gave us a space for community within this fic.
yeah.
So that's really cool that it was born from community engagement.
Oh, absolutely. I find a lot of the things I like to write about are community based. Like every story I write, I tend to get some kind of inspiration from the community, or
Yeah.
a prompt will come that I'll be like, what about this? And I'll see what kind of engagement I get from it on my Twitter, and then I'll go from there. So a lot of it is inspiration from each other, right? That's the great thing about this community. And I'm sure a lot of other
It is.
writers in this community would say the same thing, is, we just all feed off of
Yeah.
inspiration from each other.
So we were talking earlier about Always and how you had a lot of that pre-thought out before you even started posting. What was your process like for Tea Time? Because it was a totally different origin story than the first Pollen fic. Wait, was Tea Time your second fic or was it your third? I can't remember.
I think it was technically my third. So at that time, I don't know how I had time for anything else in my life, because writing for Pollen, being involved in Pollen Spaces on Twitter, but especially writing, had taken over my existence. All I did in my spare time was write. That's all I thought about. That's all I wanted to do.
Yes.
Anything in my world was about writing for Pollen. So
Right.
at the time, it was funny. I remember distinctly, I was updating Always still, because that was a long fic. I had started writing it and it was still going at that time. So I was updating for Always still.
You knew how Always was going to go.
Yeah. So that was writing in advance, and kind of that was an easier thing to write because I had everything planned out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Always was still going. I also had started writing a modern AU Pollen fic called Everything Has Changed. It's a one about a road trip.
Oh, yes. Oh, I love Everything Has Changed.
Oh, thank you. I love that one too.
The only one bed in a frigid hotel room.
That's
yes,
you know,
please, and thank you.
That's when if anyone wants a smutty modern AU, that's one to read.
Yeah, well, they had to save Eloise from nefarious Philip. What were they to do?
Yes, Philip, who ended up being this sweet little...
the sweetest marshmallow.
Man.
My baby Philip.
I know, he's a little marshmallow, so... But I had been writing that always, and then I decided for this prompt, because we had set a timeline of like, okay, release the fics for the anniversary of Romancing Mr. Bridgerton.
That's right.
And at that point in time, the anniversary was like a week or so away.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I need to balance all these updates plus this new fic. So I actually remember, not to, shout out my car, but I was planning out the story in my car on my break one day, literally planning the whole thing top to bottom of like exactly how I was going to start from this prompt of like the tea, the Grecian tea, and then getting to that point of, can I keep you? And like, how am I going to work this line into this resolution and what's going to happen? And the first version of this, I don't think I planned for Penelope and Colin to kiss at the end. But then I was like, you know what? Why not? YOLO.
Why not?
Let's make them kiss. Let's add an extra little bit of cuteness at the end. Why not? And I remember giggling to myself in my car when I came up with the cravats idea.
Yeah.
Because I was just like sitting in my car, I was like, oh, wait, because I was trying to think of what chaotic things can Penelope do while high. Like, I'm like, what can she do? Like, what chaos can I make her ensue? So I was like, okay, she's going to, mess up this office. She's going to, snoop around his room.
Her inner monologue is so good. She's like, I'm going to flip these books upside down. Chaos.
I know, and her version of chaos is so tame compared to Eloise, who's trying to scale the building to go see Theo.
I know, right? She's leaving. She's going to scandalize her whole family. Eloise is going to scandalize her whole family, and Penelope is going to flip the books upside down and de-alphabetize them. It's brilliant.
I know. She's so like, I'm like, okay, Penelope, don't get too crazy here.
So that was a car idea. Your car is literally, we just need to put you in your car.
Apparently, that's where I do all my thinking.
I love it. Some authors say the shower, some say in their dreams, but for Ninjamanda, it's her car. Like, we just need to get her in her car.
It's my car. Just sitting in my car on my break at work. But I remember sitting there and I was like, what chaotic things can I have her do next? And I was like, oh, the cravats, like how we've been talking about that. I'm like, imagine if she threw the cravats and there was some line in there like, it's raining cravats or something. And I was like, oh, it was just, I was like tickled. So I was like giggling to myself writing it. I was like writing the planning for it. I was like planning it out and I was like, then she throws the cravats out the window and I'm like snickering like.
Yes, I love it when authors amuse themselves. You know it's going to be a good story if you're crying when you're writing angst, if you're laughing when you're writing fun fluff. You know it's going to be good, when our authors are at peak inspiration.
Yes. I was just going to say the timelines of it all, like I was just trying to get this fic written in about a week. So I had a week to plan this out and write this. And I will note that I was still updating Always and Everything Has Changed at the same time. So I was probably writing for both. I remember writing this little tweet about it being like, I'm going to post this. The next update of Always is coming on this day. Next update of Everything Has Changed is coming out this day. And I'm still going to write this one shot. Like, you guys don't think I can do it? Well, I can.
That's epic.
And I was fueled off inspiration at that point. And now looking back, I'm like, Amanda, how did you do that? But, when you have that inspiration hit you.
That's so...
It's a Grecian tea. It just gets you going, You just got to write.
So, wow. So the process for Tea Time was very different than most of your other fics then, because that is, that's 1 week to write all of that.
So I planned it out in my car, and then I think it took me 2 different writing sessions to just write it all out.
Yeah.
And then what my process usually is for writing is I'll plan things out first very surface level. Then I'll go back in and I will plan things out more in detail. And then I'll write. and I'll just let myself like kind of freeform write. And then I will leave it, because if you go back and you edit your work right away, it's really difficult. So I always try to go back like at least a day later, if not a few days later. And then I go back and then I make my major edits and things like that. And then I'll do another break and I'll come back and read it through to usually just do any little grammatical errors or fixes for any grammatical errors and things. So,
do you use betas to help you edit?
I don't. I've never used a beta in my life.
Never used a beta. Wow.
I self-edit. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I look back and I see and I'm like, there's that mistake there. But, I'm like, you know what? We just go for it.
Editing all of that on your own is still wild.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
It's a ton of work because I've beta.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of work. So writing it and then taking that space for yourself and going back to edit it, that's so much work you did to create these pieces to share with us.
Yeah, and it was 3 things going on at the same week. Yeah. So like I said, I don't think I had a life that week. It was fun though. I enjoyed it.
What a good week it was for the Pollen fandom.
Right? I'm like, well, everyone, I have some updates for you. All of these. Enjoy.
I remember. I was like, it's raining. It's raining cravats and it's also raining Ninjamanda stories.
Right?
I was following Everything Has Changed. And Always. And then we got this bonus, The Trouble with Tea Time. It was a good time for Ninjamanda fans.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it was fun because all 3 pieces were very different from each other.
Yeah,
like,
they were.
Always, I will say, is very angst-driven. Like, it's sweet, it's romantic. There are some funny moments, but and it very smutty towards the end. But it is very angst-driven.
Yeah.
Where there's not a single drop of angst in the Tea Time fic. There is not, which is a very big. At the time, it was like a very big. What's the word I'm looking for? At the time, it was a very big difference for me. Like, it was a separation from what I had done before, because I love writing. Well, it all harkens back to my soap opera days. I love writing angst and drama, and this story is as undramatic as it.
Tea Time, you reached into your passions. Tea Time reached into your passions fandom.
Yeah, it's like, how can we make this as zany as possible? So it was fun writing like such different pieces. It gave me a nice little break from Always and the angst of that at the time too. So
as a reader who gets to know their authors from spending time with them, it's a lot of fun to read authors tackle different genres. So it was very cool to see you full force tackle chaos and fluff in Tea Time after, like you said, really the pain. And Everything Has Changed does have some really good pain in it.
Oh yeah, that one is pretty angsty too.
Those first few chapters are very angsty as well. But it was a modern AU. It was a totally different vibe, and it was a shorter fic. So like you said, all 3 were totally different. The vibe was totally different for all 3. But just as a reader, it's so cool to see our authors tackle different stories in different ways and still remain themselves. So I appreciate that.
Well, it's fun. It keeps things fresh, right? As a writer, you just want to try different things and enjoy. And I find writing short stories actually a lot more challenging than writing long fics for me.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult to be very concise and tell like a story in a very short way. I'm like, I want to get into more depth on this. Like, what can we do? Okay, Colin and Penelope have kissed. Now what? Actually, ever since I wrote it, I have had a few people ask me, they're like, is there going to be a sequel? Like, can there be a part 2 to Trouble with Tea Time? And I did consider it, but I'm like, it's tricky because I feel like the story is just, it
stands alone.
It's perfect in itself. It just needs to be where it is. Because I did, and I can, for your listeners, I can tell them a spoiler of what I would write if I was writing a part 2.
Yes.
So if I was to continue it, I think what I would have done is I would have wanted to incorporate the tea again. I probably would have had a situation where Penelope and Colin got high together on the tea. So maybe because obviously I think it leads you to believe, and sorry if this is, shocking to anyone, but at the end of part 1, I wanted to allude to the fact that because they kissed, Colin is going to obviously propose to Penelope because he's a man of honor. You can tell he has feelings for her in the little bit of writing, like the subtext is there.
Yeah.
So, and he says at the end of the fic, like, he's like, we'll need to talk about this after they kiss.
Yeah.
So in my mind, what went on after that would be when Penelope wakes up from being high, Colin is like, hey, I don't know how I would have written this, but let's get married. And then, as they were engaged, maybe it would have been cute to do like them as an engaged couple accidentally drink the tea, because I don't think there's any scenario you could write where it's like, yeah, let's get high together. Like, no. So I'm thinking maybe like a prank, like maybe Gregory, dosed their tea with the Grecian tea or something. And then Colin and Penelope accidentally get high and chaos ensues. And this time, maybe it's like Benedict chaperoning them and he has to chase them as they are running rampant, doing crazy things, getting into naughty situations where they shouldn't be because they need to be proper and a proper engaged couple, and he tries to stop them. So you never know, I might do a sequel that's along those lines in the future. I kind of like the story as it is now, but it is fun to think about. You just got a perfect first-hand experience of how I come up with an idea and I just like let it go, because I didn't really necessarily have all those details until this moment. But that's kind of what I do when I write, is I'll just, what's my first idea and how can I take this to a new place, and we'll just let my brain kind of move it along as we go.
I don't even know what to say. Like, my jaw is literally on the ground.
Oh, you're too cute.
That we just got a little teeny tiny moment inside of your brain, inside of your plotting brain.
In my plotting brain, yes.
And that you gave us that little gem because, of course, we would have Gregory. It would be a prank or something. Oh my gosh!
Some way to get them the tea.
Because
they would never drink it on their own.
I'm doing my best to not freak out. Yes.
Oh,
thank you.
Sweet. You never know. Maybe as a gift for
maybe,
Paul,
but even
day,
you just gave it to us.
I'll write a part 2.
Yeah, even if you don't write it, the fact that you gave us what you would do.
I gave you the story. Yeah, so people can just imagine it in their brain.
100%. So besides Tea Time Part 2, what are you working on now?
Well, right now, I don't know if anyone who has followed my work has seen, I have taken a bit of a hiatus for the moment, just because there's not a lot of Bridgerton news out there. I like to call it I'm on strike because of Netflix. So as soon as they announce season 3 and give us some news, like once they announce like a date, or give us some actual news, then they can expect to see some more information from me. But it's difficult. Yeah. I find it difficult because I wrote so much, as we just discussed. I was writing even 3 fics at a time for a solid year sometimes. I've written a lot, like for either long fic, short fic. The last fic I actually wrote start to finish was this one called Story of Us.
Yes.
It was based on it was the prompt in my brain was the pictures we got from Tudum.
Yeah, the Tudum stills.
So, yeah, so I just wrote that, and then I kind of was like, you know what? There's no news right now, and I'm beginning to feel a little burnt out on writing, just because I had written so much for so long. So I've decided to take like a little break. That's why you haven't seen any updates from me in a while. I'm definitely haven't abandoned the fics though. I still have my planning for the 2 fics I have in progress right now. So I have Illicit Instruction, which has been a really fun fic to write. It's based on the prompt from, the prompt of what the season 3 synopsis is. When we received the season 3 synopsis, I started writing that fic and I planned it out. So there's actually only a few chapters left of that story. So likely what you'll see from me when I do come back is I will finish up that story. My plan is going to be to write it all every other chapter and then release.
Yes.
Because I don't want to do it to people where I'm releasing a chapter and then I'm like, oh, I need to take another break. And then I'll release a chapter and, oh, I need to take another break.
That's really cool because if I recall correctly, we're at a really interesting spot right there. It's Cressida at her most Cressida, at her soap opera villain peak. So to be able to experience that to the end.
Yes, I have everything planned.
That's awesome.
It just needs to be written. So, and I have a hard time, as I said earlier, I'm very much a mood writer. So
Yeah.
I am not good at writing, forcing myself to write. And I find the quality of my writing really suffers when I'm not inspired and I'm just kind of forcing myself to write something to just have something written.
Yeah.
And I would never want to release that to people because I respect my readers, I respect this fandom, and I respect myself enough to not want to release, mediocre writing just for the sake of releases.
I hear you.
So, with that being said, once the inspiration hits again, which, to be honest, if we get the slightest bit of
a teaser,
send us a teaser, and that'll probably do it for me.
The teaser is going to launch a million fics.
A catalyst.
Because I know you're not the only author who's waiting for inspiration.
Exactly.
I think most readers that are really invested in their fandom's fan fiction want our authors to stay healthy and happy and only write when inspired.
Oh, you're 100% right.
So we're called Fix and Rex. I can't let you leave without asking you to give us your recommendation for your all-time favorite Pollen fanfic.
Absolutely. Okay, so my favorite, I'm going to tell people a little bit about it first, see if they can figure out what fic I'm talking about before I give the name. So if anyone remembers...
So dramatic.
That's just my style. So if anyone remembers a very special, very wonderful fan fiction that was written pre the information we received that it would be a instructional type relationship between Penelope and Colin. This fic predated that and already had that as part of their inspiration, which I loved. So once I found out that the season was going to encompass that really piqued my interest for sure. It is a Regency fic. It's a little bit smutty. It's beautifully written. Just a smidge. It's beautifully written. And it is definitely one of, in my opinion, the all-time greats in the Pollen fandom. It's called Tempting Scandal by Still Pink. It's a fantastic, fantastic piece.
Yeah, I feel like for people who enter the fandom now, it was, I don't know, how am I thinking about what Tempting Scandal was too? It was required reading.
Yeah, it was one of those ones that was required reading. Like if you were to say, what story should I get started on? That was one of them. Yeah. With Pollen.
Yeah. I feel like everyone who was together inside this fandom at the end of season 2 that we've read Tempting Scandal.
But really, like, the smut in that fic is just top notch. It's handled beautifully. It doesn't feel too... what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't feel too heavy-handed. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel too gratuitous. It's just done very beautifully. And it's just really excellent writing. Like, it feels like you're reading, honestly, a published piece. So I always think of that one as one of the best. And I always recommend that one to people. Yay. So I would definitely recommend it to anyone who's looking for a story, who hasn't read that one yet. It's one of the greats for a reason, for sure.
Yes. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, it's been wonderful talking to you. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat, and I'm excited to hear more episodes and hear more from all of our writers.
That wraps another episode of the Fix and Rex podcast. Thank you, listeners, readers, and friends, for your continued support. The Trouble with Tea Time, as well as Ninjamanda's AO3 author profile and her recommendation, will all be linked on the Fix and Rex Instagram page. A heartfelt shout out to those who shared their voicemail, Rex. Your voices bring a special touch to the podcast. I truly appreciate your contributions. Keep tuning in for more fan fiction, conversations, and recommendations. Until next time, this is WMN. Happy reading!
This is KT Knits, and my recommendation is The Temptation of One Penelope Featherington by Lazy Tuesday Morning.
My recommendation is Dress by the Sushi Monster.
E minha fic brasileira preferida é Home, da Bia Salles, no Wattpad.
I'm Auntie M, and my recommendation is Invisible String by British Teacup.
This is Lydia B, and I'm recommending Gone Girl by Phantom Phaeton.